Cheers, guys. Welcome to episode 17 of the VR show. I'm your host, Epix. Right, that. You may have caught me over on PSVR Frank, the Frank show, wearing this tie and this shirt, helping Frankie boy out with the Frank show. So that is something that I'm going to probably do a little bit moving forward just to help out as a guest host. It will not take the place of this show, but you know what? If you've got a PlayStation and you want to just focus on news that's PlayStation oriented, of course you're going to get it here. I'm going to continue to deliver it here, but you can just have the PlayStation angle over there. Go give me support on that channel. I would really appreciate it. My pacing a little off on that first show compared to what the locals are used to, and it showed a little bit. So anything you can do to go over there and help me out a little bit, you know, with some likes would be much appreciated, but never needed or required. Likewise on this channel, leave your comments below, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing to the VR show. New content every week. That's the goal. All platforms, games, hardware, you name it, it's covered here. With that said, guys, let's do one thing right off the bat right now, because while this is my show, I need a little bit of breathing space. There we go. We got a lot to talk about. Last week's VR chat was a little doom and gloom. And again, perfect time to remind those of you maybe new to the channel, there are timestamps for all segments in this show. So if there's a particular topic you're not interested in, go to the description, hit the timestamp that appeals to you, and away you go, off to what you want to hear and see. With that said, had a couple of people with Android indicating there were some issues with the timestamps. Know that I'm looking into that, and I'll let you know as soon as I find out. Now, guys, lots to talk about in this week's VR Roundup segment. We've got some really cool games in the XP segment, and going to lighten things up a little bit with this week's VR chat. No doom and gloom this week, guys. Stay tuned for that topic. All right, let's jump into this week's VR Roundtable. Within days of each other, Acer's report on dropping STARVR majority shares for possible sale, we get a story about the head-mounted display supporting Virtual Link, and now a STARVR spokesperson coming forward with the following statement. We believe it is the most responsible course of action to put the STARVR developer program on hold while there are uncertainties with our key overseas shareholder, and while our company is in the process of going private, which may entail some changes to our operations. This statement was also preemptively sent out to any devs who had previously enrolled in the program. Now, business doesn't have to be fair, but Acer coming out with their statement certainly hasn't made their own sale of shares any easier, nor has it made going private for the STARVR folks easier either. Ben Lang over at Road to VR was able to test the latest Varjo prototype head-mounted display. Just a reminder to anyone not familiar with Varjo the company or the head-mounted display, the company's using a combination of eye tracking with a portion of the screen utilizing a foveated style rendering technique. Playing in the background is a through-the-lens photo comparison between the Vive Pro and the Varjo. Ben Lang stated that the central portion had no visible screen door effect or aliasing present. He stated it was a bit like using bifocals where you have to focus on the center portion for that desired effect, but went on to say that the results were almost magical in quality. It's an accuracy of 1 degree and a precision of roughly 0.2 degrees. Varjo set to launch in the first quarter of 2019 to large enterprise company and customers for between $5,000 and $10,000 US. No audio will be included in the shipping version of the Varjo headset, with the company deciding that high-end enterprise users will have their own audio solution in use. Audi's Lawrence Schweiger, who looks after VR strategy at the company's business innovation group, took to the stage at last week's VRX 2018 in San Francisco to update the audience on Audi's use of VR. Back in 2016, Audi became one of the first car manufacturers to utilize VR, placing VR showrooms into various dealerships. Schweiger explaining that the company now has some 1,000 VR deployments in dealerships across the globe. Very cool, and in my opinion, probably better marketing for VR than we are getting from some of the brands themselves. I've stated multiple times to not worry about attrition. VR companies falling to the wayside is natural in the young VR industry, as it is in any new industry trying to cement its place. Another example of this, Jaunt, who just last month was still actively looking for buyers for its VR division, has announced it will be auctioning off much of its VR hardware December 12th, starting at 10 a.m. Pacific time for a full 24-hour period via an online auction originating in Santa Monica. Some of the key items include numerous 27-inch Apple Thunderbolt displays, numerous Dell monitors of varying sizes and reses, Samsung Odyssey system headsets, Wacom 20-inch tablets, Oculus Rift headsets, Lenovo Mirage systems and headsets, as well as various PlayStation 4 systems. Full listing via a link to the auction will be in the description below. So along with great sales online, a sad, but unfortunately another avenue to get VR gear at a good price. Potentially, that is, as sometimes in auctions you can actually end up paying more. Photos of Google's dev kit for 6 Degree of Freedom controllers showing the entire design and various layout poses have appeared online. The 6 Degree of Freedom controller, based on the earlier 3 Degree of Freedom design of the Daydream head-mounted display controllers. The Mirage Solo relying on Google's optical tracking. Google's hope is that the controller and head-mounted display can compete favorably against the upcoming Oculus Quest, but methinks personally that's a pretty fairly lofty goal. Not so sure they will achieve that, but you cannot fault them for their fiery marketing rhetoric. Of note is that each controller has its own USB-C port and power switch. Personally, I've never been a fan of the Move-style ball on any controller, including the Move, so seeing it here not helping sell the aesthetics for me personally, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. There are quite a few 3D printable stocks available online for the various VR solutions on the market. The VRGM-001 is one of the better ones in my opinion, and hopefully one of my viewers who's been working on his own, something similar, will get to launch his as well. Well, the VRGM-001 is available for download on Thingiverse, and it has been since about March of this year. It's extremely lightweight, weighing about as much as a single touch controller. It's about 165 grams, or for the US viewers, 5.8 ounces. You can see the stability assist and aiming that it provides in the video playing in the background is pretty damn good. You can see additional details on Thingiverse via the link in the description below. 'Tis definitely the season for VR deals. If you've been waiting on the VR sidelines for a reason to take the plunge, maybe a really good deal, and you happen to live in Europe, you don't want to pass up on this bundle. It is called the PlayStation VR Mega Pack, and whereas bundles usually include 1 or 2 kind of mediocre games and some craftware, this thing includes 5 games, and pretty much all 5 are pretty stellar. You get Astrobot Rescue Mission, Skyrim, Wipeout Amiga Collection, Doom VFR, and finally PlayStation VR Worlds. Really, that last one probably the weakest of a pretty damn stellar lineup. This comes with the Move controllers, it comes with the camera as well, all of that for €330. If you're in the UK, it launches December 3rd. Elsewhere, in other European countries, a day later, December 4th. And not to be totally outdone, if you happen to live in North America and you're looking for a pretty good PlayStation VR bundle, December 14th in the US and Canada, this bundle for $349 US or $449 Canadian, it comes with 2 games, not 5, but 2 pretty damn good games as well. Borderlands.to VR, of course, that upcoming game, and Beat Saber, as well as the PlayStation VR headset, the camera, and the 2 Move controllers. I promised during the intro that this week's VR chat would be a bit more lighthearted, a little bit more positive, less doom and gloom. Likewise with this last VR Roundup story. fantastic sales results for the big three. Get this. So the third quarter of 2018, VR has grown by 8% over the same period in 2017. The Rift selling 300,000 headsets in those 3 months. The Vive, a respectable 230,000. PlayStation VR, the biggest, 463,000 headsets, basically 500,000, bringing Sony's total almost to 3.5 million. So a shout out to all three of those brands, with a special shout out, of course, to Sony. Very well done, leading the charge for VR. Let's start off the VR XP segment with Borderlands 2 VR, because of course we are getting very, very close. That game dropping for PlayStation VR on December 14th. We have found out though that it is a timed exclusive, not a full exclusive. So hopefully we're going to see that over on the VR PC side of things. I mentioned that last week. Well, the PlayStation VR version, $49.99 US. It's not going to include the co-op or multiplayer components, but they have added stuff to the single player experience to kind of make up for that a little bit. Definitely not a title I'm gonna miss. Cannot wait. If you're a fan of tabletop gaming, then perhaps this title that pays homage to it may be your thing. It's another PSVR title, and unfortunately another damn exclusive. But developer Future Lab has you commanding a little robot avatar across a square grid. You control where it moves and when it shoots, and then you wait for the other players to do the same. Aimed shots at specific body parts, along with being able to do more damage than regular shots, can also change the opposing player's direction. You know, their mechs will change direction. The disadvantage is that chews up critical time. Aside from taking out your opponent's mech, you're also able to collect points from the board itself. No exact release date other than sometime in 2019. Other than Netflix, we know of other streaming services, and now every single studio basically wants to create their own streaming service. Much the same, it appears, on the distribution of digital games on the PC side of things. So we know we've got Steam, there's a couple of others, GOG Games. Well, Epic Games, like Electronic Arts, wanting to go it on their own, creating their own download service for games, game purchases. They're going to make SUBNAUTICA, which is a really good title, available free permanently to users who download the title from December 14th to December 27th. The catch being you sign up for their service, but in the process, saving the $25 that this game normally retails for. While I'm not a big fan of having this many different digital distribution depots, I gotta say SUBNAUTICA was a hell of a lot of fun, and for free, you can't pass that up. Alright guys, time for the VR chat segment. I want to do something a little bit less doom and gloom this time around. I want to talk about gameplay styles that are still untapped or we could see more of in virtual reality. And look, here's a technology many of us have supported VR now almost for 3 years. And yet, within that 3 years, sure, there's moments of brilliance, right? Don't get me wrong. Astrobot, a perfect example of love it, you know what, be ambivalent about it, fair enough. But I think most agree it at least breathed new life into an old genre, the platformer. And it did it in a way, I think, that was different from Lucky's Tale. Lucky's Tale, for its part, also did the same. It kind of reinvigorated, you know, the platform genre by adding things to VR that just took it outside of its tired old format. And I personally think Astrobot did that by a factor of about 10 times more when it was released. But there's still so much left that hasn't even really been tapped in. And that's what I want to talk about. So I've got a couple of notes here that I want to look at. from time to time to just ensure that I cover all of these, because I got to thinking about just how much gaming, and I've been gaming a hell of a long time, right? 46, and I started gaming single digits, so easily over 30 years, from Atari 2600, Odyssey, the 20-in-1 crap game devices before the Atari that they had, where, you know, they promised you 10 different sports, but they all kind of looked the same. Just put it this way, a long time gaming. So there's a lot that's out there. One of my favorite games, I just got started playing it again recently, has been XCOM. There was a fantastic version of XCOM called Xenonauts, and there was a community edition, which was a free thing that you could play, and they did a fantastic job of streamlining what I like most about XCOM. And if you're not familiar with the game, it's a strategy game, it's turn-based, you're essentially protecting Earth from alien invaders. And while you're doing that, you are researching new technologies, upgrades to existing tech, trying to keep pace with the aliens and their superior technology. And it's just a fantastic strategy game. I had a hell of a lot of fun with it. And I got to thinking, how could that be applied to virtual reality? How could you take a game like XCOM? And just using a little bit of lateral thinking, and let me know what you guys think. You might have other ideas outside of what I was kind of coming up with, but I was thinking, you know, at the very least, just have the ability to jump into your soldiers. So in XCOM, you have your phases where you do your research, all of that stuff. Then there's a phase where aliens invade a place somewhere on the planet. And you go to that place to stop them with X amount of soldiers and technology. And then the game plays out turn-based on a grid. If it's within an urban landscape, it's an urban grid. If it's farmland, agricultural, it's more agricultural. Forested, you get the picture. In VR, rather than moving your player in third person, and you could still do that and have you be there as a spectator moving, you know, this unit, or even better, be within the unit, look through the unit's eyes, have a certain amount of movement, so it could still be quasi-turn-based, and when that movement meter runs out, you're on to the next soldier. There could even be an online component to that type of game where maybe you don't want to play soldiers, you want to start controlling aliens, and there were a couple of MMOs that have done this. You could just randomly jump into people's games, purposely be a bit of a griefer, but have that be okay because you're playing an alien. The purpose is a PvP purpose, to dispatch that person's soldiers. So you get all the items and the abilities that that alien would normally get, but now you've infused it with human AI, which is a little bit more, you know, unpredictable than computer AI. And I think that would be a fantastic way to kind of introduce a game like XCOM, Xenonauts, UFO into virtual reality. And that's just one aspect of it. Then I got to thinking, because it starts snowballing, what about MMOs? And there's some MMOs, and look, if you enjoy them, power to you. I'm not here to rain on your parade. They're just not for me, right? I've played some of the greats, Ultima Online, EverQuest, World of Warcraft, and I got pretty damn addicted to those games. I got right into them. And I'm thinking even World of Warcraft, that could be a perfect example of where you could use VR over the shoulder. It's an older engine, it's cartoony, it would be very, very friendly for virtual reality. And it would be a good way for Blizzard to breathe life back into that old IP, right? Every year since, 2009 or 2010, I think, was WoW's peak, where they hit 14, 15 million players subscribed. It's been hemorrhaging since then. We're now in 2018. For a game that was released in 2004, essentially uses the same engine, there's all kinds of potential for that in VR. whatever work they'd have to do, I can't think it would be a lot of work to overhaul, because they've done far more drastic things. When they took the old continent and redid it to introduce flying, for example, they were able to keep the same feel but drastically change it. So why not an upgrade or an expansion that, as part of the expansion, it allows you to play with your VR over the shoulder, control your guy, but be able to experience Azeroth in VR. I think that would be fantastic. Catch those vistas, the dungeons, but do it in a way you're not really conveying an advantage to the person in VR, and at the same time not a real penalty, right? Maybe that's just spectator, that you're kind of hanging behind your character, because through the eyes, that's an option within World of Warcraft 2. Most people don't opt to play that way because you're not able to see everybody around you. So I think over the shoulder would work fantastically for a game like World of Warcraft, and again, breathe new life into it and bring back some of the player base that may have adopted VR in the meantime. But the ultimate gameplay styles or genres, as of yet still untapped, would have to be war games, in my opinion. We've done a few. They've done the Call of Duty stuff. We've got the, of course, now I forget it and it's not in my notes, the War Dust War, whatever. It's a Battlefield style in VR, okay? We've got a few of those. Onward is another, and we know there's a handful of those. But what about some of the classics, right? Some of the best war simulation type games I've ever played. M1 Tank Platoon was a fantastic game where you were part of a tank crew in 3D, and this was before a lot of 3D acceleration. I talk about mech games being fantastic for VR. Tank games, basically the same thing, except imagine how in VR you could bring World War II to life, right? Being part of a tank crew. Maybe you play as the German side with the Panzers and Tigers trying to stem the tide of the Allied landing after Normandy. Or the early days when, the Panzers made those first blitzkrieg strikes. Just so much potential there in VR for tank-based games. We know how well cockpit-based games do. You could recreate World War II and make it feel as if you were actually there. Would be fantastic. Haven't seen a hell of a lot of those. And in the same vein, submarine-based games. Again, another series that I used to love. Were sub-based games. Silent Hunter. I'm trying to think of what the other series was. Silent Hunter is the big one that I remember. It was fantastic. Again, pre-3D acceleration, and you were able to take that sub all across the world, fight against enemy ships. Another fantastic game that would just do so well in VR. And criminal that we don't have those. 3 years in, nobody's thought to make that type of a military game. Anyways, so I've touched on those. And then, of course, without saying, we've seen mods that introduce a little bit of VR to a game like GTA. Having just played Red Dead Redemption in cinematic mode, I can tell you first-person VR would be fantastic. Everything from the horse riding, the gun shootouts would be just fantastic in VR. So those are some genres that I was thinking of that I think are just criminally underrepresented in VR and would do so well, and yet, again, we just don't have many examples. What are some of the games you guys can think of, genres that haven't been represented in VR that you think could be popular, could really breathe new life into that genre? I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. Again, if you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. Guys, thank you so much. As always, cheers. And we'll catch you guys again for the next show.